I have been watching a ton of movies lately, so here are my thoughts on some of my most recent first watches and my subsequent Letterboxd score as well. Make sure to watch all the way to the end so you can see my thoughts on Joker Folie Do. The first film we'll be talking about here is 1992's Candyman. I didn't really know much about this film going into it. I knew that it was very iconic and I've heard about this character a lot. And I only really knew about it is that bees were involved in some way. But this film absolutely floored me. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 star in Letterboxd. And it's now up there as one of my favorite horror or slasher films ever. Basically from the moment where she woke up in the bathroom, that's when the film really kicked into a whole new gear. And I loved every second after that. Next film we'll be talking about here is The Boy and the Heron. Ever since I saw that this film beat out Spider-Verse at the Grammys this year for the Best Animated Picture, I really wanted to check it out and see what all the hype was about. And I can confirm that it is an incredible film. Studio Ghibli knows how to make a great film. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. I've still only seen a few Studio Ghibli films. I still need to get into the other ones like Spirited Away and the other iconic ones. But all the ones I watched so far have just all been so gorgeous. And they all have great stories and characters, and this one is no different. And it even has a stacked American dub cast for this. It's got Robert Pattinson, Mark Hamill, Christian Bale, Dave Bautista, a bunch of other ones that I'm missing, but it's got a great cast too if you listen to the English dub version. But even after all that, I still don't know if I would have picked it over Spider-Verse because The Boy and the Heron is great. Studio Ghibli knows how to make great films, but Spider-Verse is completely changing the game when it comes to animation, so I still think they should have been awarded for that. But that doesn't take away from The Boy and the Heron because it is still a very good film. Another horror movie that I watched recently for the first time is Black Christmas. And this is the original from 1974, not one of the other remakes, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 star. I got the idea to watch this from Blake over at Duct Tape because he loves this film. He gave it a 5 out of 5, so I was very interested in seeing this. And like I said, it is very good. And it is also basically the start of the modern horror slasher genre. This is the first film of its kind. I always thought that it was Halloween, it was John Carpenter's Halloween, but it really is Black Christmas. It has so many elements that we see in modern horror slasher classics, and we still see today. It has the moments of seeing from the killer's perspective. We hear the killer's heavy breathing. The killer is calling on the phone, calling its victims on the phone. And these are all things that we see and think of that are very iconic for other films, not from Black Christmas. And it really deserves to be in this conversation more as one of the best horror slashers of all time. And this film also has a great cast. It has a great cast that you can root for. It also has a great cast that you don't mind watching in between all the kills. Because sometimes if you have a boring cast and boring writing, you're just basically waiting for these people to get popped off one by one. But with these ones, you're actually kind of interested in the story. You want to hear more from these characters, and you just want to see more of them. So that's another huge positive for this film. And it also has a lot of really cool and iconic moments and shots, specifically directed around the killer, mainly focusing around one eye or just the eyes. That's all so cool and very, very menacing as well, not showing us the true identity of this killer. And I also really like the ending, the open ending where we still don't even know who the killer was. Absolute banger. Definitely check it out. Now, I've been talking about some really good horror movies. Let's talk about some pretty bad ones next. I was recently scrolling on Peacock and I saw that Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2. I watched the first one last year. It was at the bottom of my list for films from 2023. And I was just curious to see what could possibly be done in a sequel. And it's no surprise, this film is a mess. The character designs are kind of better. The Pooh mask is at least better. And it tries to dive into the lore and the backstory of these characters, which is absolutely nuts. The kills are pretty forgettable, so you could probably skip this one too. I gave it a 1 out of 5. It was only got an extra half star because it clearly had a much bigger budget than the first one. Now the next film is another film that is really kind of in the now public domain universe, so let's make them a killer, and that is The Mousetrap. And I can say confidently, this is one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life. It doesn't work as a slasher. The character sucks. The writing sucks. The whole look of the killer sucks. The kills suck. And there's even an aspect of it where this killer can teleport for no reason. And throughout it, it keeps cutting from the main story back to one of the survivors being in prison, being interrogated by these detectives. And every character in these scenes are just so insufferable. The writing is terrible. This film absolutely sucks. Do not watch it. I will say though, the opening of the film is very funny because it's like a Star Wars-esque crawl, basically showing that they are not associated with Disney and trying to really cover their asses, and it's really funny. But since then, after that, movie's absolutely terrible. All right, let's talk about some palate cleansers here because I also recently got to watch Will and Harper on Netflix. I don't really want to dive too much into this, but I just want to say people really need to watch this. It's such a beautiful, beautiful story about acceptance, about friendship, and it's just two very beautiful souls that got together to tell this incredible story. If you have Netflix, really watch it. I really cannot recommend it more. I gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd. It's incredible. Moving on to another film that I gave 5 stars on, and that is The Wild Robot. This is only the third film this year that I've given 5 stars to, and it absolutely deserves it. This film is one of the most gorgeous animated films I've ever seen in my entire life. It's not only gorgeous because of the visuals, but it's also just a very beautiful story, and the music intertwined with everything all made everything just so perfect. And the director of this film also made How to Train Your Dragon, that makes sense. This guy just knows how to shoot an animated film during a fight scene. Like if you have seen Wild Robot, you know what I'm talking about. The song like Touch the Sky or whatever, and that all intertwined with him learning how to fly was all so beautiful. It's one of my favorite scenes in all of animation, really. And it's got a stacked voice cast. It's got Mark Hamill, again, mentioned him earlier, Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal. It is such an incredible film. I really, seriously, cannot recommend it more. Go to the theaters and watch The Wild Robot. And another film that I recently got to watch for the first time is The Godfather, one of the most iconic films of all time. And of course, I give it a 5 out of 5. This film is incredible. It really deserves to be in this conversation with one of the best films of all time, with some incredible performances. I will say, though, it didn't floor me like most of the other films that I will say are that I believe are the best films of all time. When I think of that category in my head, I typically go to movies like Interstellar and Shawshank Redemption, and I don't know if I would say that The Godfather is better than any of those two. But that's not to say this film was not incredible. I didn't know much about it going into it. I obviously knew about the opening where it was the day of my daughter's wedding, but other than that, I didn't know much about what was going to happen in this film. And then there's a lot of awesome action sequences that really I wasn't expecting. I do also want to shout out James Caan because I think he was a real bright spot in this film. I didn't know much about his performance going into it. I knew that he was iconic for playing this character, but I thought that his performance was awesome. It did also kind of suck to see the end of his character so abruptly, but at least it was for a good cause. And has some awesome action sequences in this film. It really is a very, very well done film. And it makes sense why it's in this conversation as one of the best ever. All right, let's talk about it. Joker, Folie, Deux. I went into this film not knowing what to expect, and I came out of it really liking it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. There's just so much that I want to talk about this film, so let's just start from the beginning. The movie opens with an awesome cartoon sequence that's very Looney Tune inspired. From the get-go, it really got me hooked, and I love that they're going with all these different avenues to try to tell this really complex story. And now you really can't talk about this film without talking about the fact that there are musical numbers in it. And I think you can look at this film in a better light by not calling it a musical, by saying this is a movie that uses music and musical numbers to show the deteriorating mental health of these characters and their grasp on reality. Because from the very beginning, there's a music teacher who sets the stage for this film. Because he says that people can use music to help heal what is fractured. And from that point on, I'm like, okay, that's the basis for why there's music in this film. And I'm going to go along with whatever kind of music we have in this film now. And I thought the music and the singing was all very well intentioned and very well done. I think the bright spot when it comes to the music was The Joker Is Me, that whole part in the courtroom. That scene was so awesome. But one other thing that people really did not really enjoy is the ending. And I didn't have a huge problem with the ending because I never really saw this being the Joker of whatever universe this is. I never saw Joaquin Phoenix as that. If they were going to go down the route that they did, and you know what I'm talking about, they should have had that specific character involved in the story more. You can't just have him come out of left field and show him 2 times over a 2-hour movie and then have him do that. He just needed to be involved in the story more. And I think if he was, people wouldn't be as upset about it. I also think another really strong part of this film was every single scene during the trial. Getting to see the perspective from the trial every now and then from the live cameras all just added so much more to the film. It just made it feel more real. I personally think Joker Folie Deux is a very worthy sequel. I thought it was very good, and I would very much like to hear your guys' opinions on it because there are a lot of different opinions on this film. Everyone I knew that saw this film before I did said it was awful, and I really liked it. What score on Letterboxd did you give Joker Folie Deux? And what kind of score would you give the other films that I talked about?